This is the Ikegami TM14-20R, a broadcast monitor made in 1991. The tube is curved with a 4:3 aspect ratio and a minimum of 700 lines of resolution. It's quite a high-end model with a lot of features that we're going to look at shortly. If you can see a mark on the screen where I'm pointing now, there's a chip unfortunately in the glass, and it's a fairly deep chip. So that's what that mark is, if you're wondering. The monitor has handles which have been screwed in on the sides. That's useful when the monitor is rack mounted, and you can pull it out on its slides when it's in the rack. And the rails for the rack mount, the rails attach, as they do on many broadcast monitors, they attach on the bottom sides where I'm pointing, and you can see in the diagram that the slides are pictured in such a way that they can slide into each other and go back into the rack. Then you can pull the monitor out of the rack and add or subtract any cables or make modifications as need be. Company badge, Kali light, infrared receiving port, warning lights, the Gauss button, power switch. There is a master power switch on the back. On the other side, model badge, and then a numerous amount of buttons. On top of that, this whole panel here pushes out, or pushes in to come out, and then we have the deeper adjustments available inside, which is largely driven by this rotary dial there, and we'll have a little bit more of a look of that later. This monitor is all metal construction on top, on the sides, on the back, on the bottom. Arriving at the back, we start off with a big heatsink, the fin sticking out the back. Moving down, master power switch. Ikegami recommends that that stays on and you use the front switch for turning on and off. Fuse holder, IEC power socket, multi-volty, even back then in 91. Can take either, doesn't need to be switched by a sliding switch between 110 and 220, 240 or anything like that. Our model number here is slightly different with a P on the end, probably meaning PAL, made in good old Japan. There are a number of vacant slots, as you can see. We'll start on what's filled and what comes with the monitor as, or by default. The auxiliary input accepts RGB and component. Now this is a loop through system, so you can put your red, your green and your blue in, and then you can take it out and send it to another monitor. However, there is an expansion module available that alters the properties and causes these to be two separate inputs. So you could have two lines of RGB going into the monitor. This monitor is not equipped with that expansion kit. Video input A, B and C, composite videos, again loop through connections on the other side. And there's our sync. If you want to go with your RGBS, your SCART RGB, you put your sync in there and your colors back over here where we just looked. There's the remote controller, plug in with a remote of some sort, some controlling device elsewhere in the studio, indicate the telly lamp on or off, change inputs, do all basic controls remotely from a different location. Also might double up as the input, the connector for the Ikegami color and white balance calibration probe. I don't think there's any other connector on the monitor for it to connect to, so I'd say that connection there is used for the probe as well. There's a whole lot of unused slots here for digital input and output. This would be the SDI signal type or a predecessor to it, because we're going back fairly early here. Again, there's no expansion card that's been installed to take advantage of that. Also, more expansions available. Decoder output, S-Video can go in here. Unfortunately, it doesn't have S-Video, which is a pity, without the expansion card put in. Let's have a look inside. Tops off, very spacious inside. Starting on the tube, that is a Panasonic tube, or specifically Matsushita. I can't zoom in on that label very well with this camera setup, but you can see from this photo I've taken on screen now that it is Matsushita, and it's monitor grade at 34 centimeters in size. This here is that control board. If I pop it out now, there we go, it slides out, and you can see that flat ribbon cable that's connected to it. It goes elsewhere inside. Again, very spacious, compartmentalized. This board here is the deflection board. That board down in there is the power supply board. Here's our flyback with 2 focus pots and a screen pot. That screen pot I think doesn't work. The true screen pot is on the net board, where I'm pointing right there next to the red wire. Also appears to be what looks to be another flyback down in the bottom that loops into the main flyback up here. Unusual design. This module here contains the expansion boards, and the expansion board slots are available, are accessible by taking this side panel off, which is another 4 screws to remove like the top panel, and then we can get into the expansion area. These are our expansion boards, and they are numbered 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, and 5. 1 and 2 are essential boards. I'll take out board number 1 shortly, and we'll have a closer look at that one. But 1 and 2 are both essential to the operation of the monitor. The 3s are expansions, and number 3 that's in there is a PAL decoder board. Number 4 is also another essential, and number 5 is optional. Number 5 is for the digital inputs that we looked at before. So if we move back around, you can see those unused digital input and output areas. When board 5 is placed inside, there is a way to utilize that space with board 5 and then hook it up so it connects into the back there, and you fill up the slots obviously with the sockets. And I think there's also an added power supply unit that's required for that expansion. As far as the 3s are concerned, this is where you can put your NTSC decoder, your other types of PAL decoder, and a Faruja decoder board as well. Some of those boards are double slot boards and require 2 slots. So the NTSC boards takes up 2 bays, the Faruja decoder takes up 2 bays, so you wouldn't be able to use those 2 together. And you can see on the screen some of the available units and which PAL signals they decode and how many slots they take up. I assume that I won't be able to get NTSC Composite in colour the way this is set up. This is a PAL. Well, I'm in Australia, this is a PAL monitor, it's going to do PAL, so we'll test it anyway to see if it does NTSC. If you want to get these boards out, you need to undo that screw there, and this plate lifts up a little bit to allow you to then pull the boards out. And if you may have already noticed, the actual boards themselves have numbering on them, 1, 2, 3, so you don't go sticking them in slots that they do not belong in. These boards can be quite tight, especially this first one, as it's got 2 big connectors that it combines with to plug in to the expansion board. Yeah, that is tough. Righto, the MPU board's out. One of the essential boards, it's got battery on it. Button cell battery. Thankfully it's not one that's going to leak and cause corrosion everywhere. Some EPROMs by the look of it. This board will save your settings in the monitor. It controls the on-screen menu system, the digital controls. On the back, part number and MPU board, and the 2 big connectors I mentioned before that make this one harder to get out. Some of the other boards only have 1 of those connector types. This one's the PAL decoder board. Original Ikegami, Japan. Decoder P for PAL. Only one connector. Easier to plug in and out. There's the back side. It's funny, we take it for granted now, but back in those days, NTSC and PAL decoding was done with these big boards, and we take it for granted now because it's really just such a simple function that evolved in later monitors. While we're at it, let's check out, just by chance, I've got a Sony BVM of a similar era open. It's a 14-incher, late 80s, and you can see the amount of boards that it's got on the side and its notes on board installation. NTSC comb filter, decoder, CCAM, RGB component. So all those things were done all on separate boards back in those days. Amazing. Alright, while we're here, we may as well try duck hunt. I'm sure the gun will work. Let's just make sure. There we go. Another one. Let's do one more. We don't need to go. Righto, the gun works, unsurprisingly. PAL NES hooked up via Composite video. Obviously the PAL decoder is working correctly. Make sure you've got a termination BNC set on your Composite loop through connector. If I take that BNC terminator off, that's all I get. So if you're wondering why you're not getting a proper picture, it might be because you don't have things terminated. There's the terminator back on. Although I have noticed there's some horizontal streaks throughout all of the picture, which is abnormal. I'm not sure what is causing that. However, we are getting PAL in color. Let's try NTSC. I think that's going to be more interesting. Here's the Saturn hooked up via Composite video. It's all NTSC, NTSC console, NTSC game. And I like how I'm spammed on screen. The monitor knows it's not a PAL signal, and stating at the bottom you can see no slot decoder. It knows the NTSC decoder's not inside, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I go into the menu and go to auto select, and I can change channel A, which it's connected into. I can go into NTSC, PAL B, PAL M, CCAM, auto, change it to any of those, and it doesn't change anything. Very amusing, almost like a paywall or a modern day nag screen telling me what I already know. But in any case, no color without an NTSC decoder board on an NTSC composite signal. No surprises. Finally, back on the Megadrive again in good old RGB. Good RGB from the Megadrive, although this Megadrive hasn't had any RGB bypassing and it has some jail bars in it. Still, it gives a pretty good picture as is. All in all, this is a very good alternative to Sony's Aperture Grill Trinitron tubes. If you prefer the shadow mask style, then certainly go for the Ikegami here. Its RGB can be adjusted color-wise. We can draw it down to black and white, or we can saturate it beyond saturation. We can adjust brightness, contrast, all the usuals of course, but it does produce a very nice image. This is a 1991 monitor, so it's fairly old, but the picture is sharp, it's bright, it's got no burn in, its geometry is very good. It does have a bit of misconvergence on the left, although this thing might have finally warmed up well enough to remove a lot of that misconvergence that it had. Now, it's still got it on its left side, red tinge on the left, most stuff, but apart from that, still a very good image, and I highly recommend it. There's also the 20-inch version of the monitor available. This thing is fairly expandable, but the NTSC lacking in composite, no S-video, few little compromises there, but if you're only running RGB, this is great. It looks really good. I would be quite content playing this right now on this monitor. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more. Hopefully some more Ikegami soon, maybe some Panasonic. We'll see what else I can dig up.